Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are finishing our discussion of Hacktivist, which is part one of our Summer of Social Media series. And the trajectory of the summer is that we will advance further chronologically in time as social media declines on a very similar scale. And honestly, it started already.
It really has. It really has. So as a reminder, last week we talked Volume 1. Volume 1 was 4 issues, came out between January and April 2014. And then I clearly at some point in there, they greenlit a Volume 2. Just based on when Volume 2 Issue 1 came out, I'm guessing maybe it was after the series was done, because there's a pretty good gap there. Volume 2, which we're talking about today, is 6 issues, ran from July to December 2015. So, you're talking about April 2014 for Hacktivist Volume 1, number 4 to July 2015. So what is that? 15 months? 15 months in there.
It's not much for how drastic the total shift was.
But I mean, if you work under the base assumption of at least 6 months in terms of planning and or at least producing one issue, maybe they already had the idea, but in terms of when they started writing and actually started production, get them at least 6 months. So maybe beginning of 2015 is when they started putting pen to paper for writing scripts and starting working on art somewhere in there. That just ballparking what a publishing timeline would be. But you're absolutely right, Mike. I mean, we've already taken a step and seen, and we're being shown a real downside of what an online community can be versus in Volume 1, it was Your Life, the app, was still very much seen as a good thing that was infected by an outside source. In that case, it was the U.S. government coming in and wanting to use their data and use their database and use that info for their own goods, which is, I think, a theme that was very, I don't know about relevant, or it was maybe a little more top of mind back then, right? The idea of free and open communication, absent of any kind of interference, specifically government interference. Here in Volume 2, we're seeing while it may not be specifically the Your Life app, the work of Nate and Ed propagate out into the world and see what that like what the violent end ends up being.
Yeah, so let's zoom out. What do you think of this volume?
I'm okay with. I enjoy kind of the arc that they went on. I don't know if I fully like every story choice they made to get there. Like some things I thought maybe were a little unnecessary. Some character introductions. So much of the plot or the narrative here hinges on Nate's character just saying one thing in public and then telling everyone else in private, like, no, that's all an act. And it seems like maybe we could have solved a lot of problems if at some point he just kind of bit the bullet and was like,
do you remember
basically revealed that earlier as opposed to waiting for the end? That's kind of a tropey way to tell a story. But
yeah, do you remember the conspiracy theory episode of Community where it was Jeff took an introduction to conspiracy theories?
Yes. Yeah.
And the dean was like double, triple, and quadruple juked because he just kept saying yes to everyone.
Yeah.
And Annie at the end of the episode just screamed at him. She was like, if you say yes to everyone, you're not doing conspiracies. You're just doing random crap. And that's what it felt like with his character in this book, where it was just it's just like, none of these twists matter if we just know every time he starts talking, just skip 5 pages ahead to find out what he actually means.
Exactly. Yeah. They what are his actual motives? But that's a specific kind of story construction idea. The overall idea of this thing getting out of their hands and ending up with the worst possible people and them having in some ways to kind of deal with and reconcile kind of what they wrought. I overall liked that. It sits a little weird with me, especially now, reading in 2025, when we get towards the end and Ed's realization is like he basically has the Captain America realization of like what we did is so dangerous and so powerful that it's only safe if we control it. You know,
have you seen the new Mission Impossible?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
same thing.
Exactly.
Ethan walks away with the entity in his pocket, and it's like, oh, it's too dangerous for anybody to control, so that's why I have it in my pocket. It's like, destroy it. If that's true, destroy it.
Yeah, the idea of some sort of, in this case, like
everyone's corrupt, but not me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As long as I know I have it and I'm in control, then I know I'm safe, and thus everyone else is safe. But we can't trust anybody else. We're the only ones. So that kind of deification, specifically again of our Wonder Boy tech geniuses, billionaires, plays different in 2015 than it does now in 2025. So that kind of sits a little wrong with me, but I do like the idea of them, this idea of the thing they created getting away from them and having to deal with that and seeing what happens and seeing a character, what is her name? Sea Queen. This idea of her feeling righteous.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
because that is a person that very much still exists out in the world. This idea who thinks of it's almost like not thinking about consequences or not caring about them because they believe that this is the way it has to be done, that you have to burn everything down. And it doesn't matter what comes back up because they haven't thought that far yet. You know, that they're not thinking about all they're thinking about is the end
this
goals.
Is what Aaron Sorkin calls the pajama people. And my comp for this volume is Newsroom Season 3, where it's like someone tries to do a populist thing with Neil and, you know, the like air gap computer and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's just one of those things that it's like, it is so clunky with exposition to explain. Like the mechanics of the plot are just so clunky that there is just no graceful way to tell this story.
There really isn't.
And I think that was the trouble in 2014 was like, gotta explain so much so that you can understand one little point we're trying to make. And it's just like, you know what? If people can't wrap their heads around it, the impact of the point is going to be lost. And if people are sitting here reading exposition about how networks and stuff work, instead of actually reading a story about characters they care about, it's not going to work. So, like this volume really doesn't work for me at all. Like the one thing that I like is I do think the overarching story is a good and necessary follow-up because it is like, oh, like the tech is not this silver bullet that, you know, if one altruistic person got it, then it would be all positive and no negative. Like this is a complete backlash to that. It's very much that scene at the end of Batman Begins where, you know, Gordon says, "What about escalation?" And Batman says, "Escalation?" He's like, "Yeah, you know, you start wearing." Right, we start wearing Kevlar vests,
body armor, body piercing bullets. Right. You wear a mask. Oh no,
which of course is exactly where the series went. It's like, oh, you get a masked vigilante, you're going to get a crazier masked vigilante, and going back the other way.
That's an idea. That's a core idea in the Batman mythos. The idea that he starts becoming Batman to take on the mob, and then is him doing that what draws all these crazier people into Gotham. So as Batman's presence made Gotham a more unsafe place. That's an idea that recurs often.
And it's been stolen by Marvel. I mean, that was in the Civil War movie. Vision said something about, like, you know, since we first went public with our powers, the number of potentially world-ending events has gone up proportionally. It's like, that tracks.
And it is that idea of if you start something regardless of what your intent was, if it's something that is so, it's like Oppenheimer, right?
Yes, right.
You know, or you know, the first person who created a firearm probably couldn't have had an idea of what that could have led to. You know, but you
No, they thought about what
introduced
they would use it for.
exactly,
They don't
exactly.
think about what everyone
You
would
have
use it for, and that's
introduced
certainly what's going on with AI right now. Is a
that's the
company's
great
like,
cop.
right? I can make this thing to do this, and journalists in society are like, but isn't it also going to do this, and this? And they're like,
Well, no, I'm not
but it
going to
can
do that.
right. It's like I'm
Yeah.
not going to do that, and what I want it for is this, and this is good. We all agree on this, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
So yeah, I agree with you saying there that there is the overall theme presented in this volume. I think is good, and I think you said necessary as well. I agree with that. It's a good microscope to
it
view
curbs your
this world.
cynicism about the first one of like, see,
Yeah,
I was right. Now,
yeah,
like
yeah.
these guys
But
might actually be legit in terms of
yeah,
what the two of them, well, like what
yeah,
they claim to be, what they are.
and I think
But
they are. I think they're
yes,
meant to
yes.
be.
Oh, they
Yeah.
are proven to be legit here, beyond the shadow of a doubt.
Mhm.
But naive, like you would expect a 32 and 28-year-old to be, or whatever their ages were.
Yeah, they're a
21.
couple years on now. Yeah, without question, there is a lack of worldliness to them. But I think maybe what you were getting at was while you like the themes, the individual steps to get there, the actual storytelling didn't quite work for you.
Well, yes, because
Yeah,
if you look at the things I praised Volume One for, they ran away from that. I was
yeah,
praising the small cast. This
yeah,
cast blew up. It was
yeah,
enormous. Like if you gave me just like Volume Two blind without words in it after reading Volume One, every other page I would be like, "Who is this person? Why do they have someone?" Now, obviously, you introduce like an actual like arch nemesis type villain person, and she's got a lot of screen time. But there are a lot of like minor characters, and then like the dumb trope of like now there's someone new from the government who's looking into the work of the person who was the villain in the first one, and they're gonna go visit her in jail and rehash all this crap, and it's just like this is just bad storytelling.
Well, he's in the first volume. That Reginald character, he's a
is
side character. Yeah.
right.
My bigger problem was the agent, whatever, the older guy who ends up being. You get the reveal at the end that he was the guy behind Tower, or he's the guy that's in charge of all of this, or one of the big bads. You get that reveal at the end. That I felt was very tropey because if that guy had been present in the first book, and then they came back and made him a bad guy, I'd be more forgiving. But he gets introduced here as like a high level, a high level position in U.S. intelligence, who's like. He's like Nate's boss, I guess. Now that Nate's working at what's it called? Hold on, Vigil. Is that what it's? I think it's called Vigil. That's
Yeah,
like the
Vigil. Yeah,
whatever.
it's
Yeah,
a little on the nose.
seriously, but still, that guy is like Nate's boss, and it turns out, oh no, he's the guy behind the tower and all that. I didn't need that thing because that's obviously not going to go anywhere. What are we just showing like more corruption in government when it comes to security
right, like, the stance on government is
Yeah,
irrelevant in this book.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that was
Well, it's already been established too in the
right.
first
It's
volume.
right. We already know it. The government isn't evolving or changing. They're just 3 beats behind on everything,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
means you're getting hit with redundant and unnecessary information again and again and again. And through clunky expositional dialogue.
Yeah, and I think that this is one. That's one aspect in specific that has not changed in from then to now in the decade that's passed. The idea of any of this technology or power or oversight being in government hands. There's a skepticism about that. There's probably more skepticism now than there was in 2014, 2015, but it still existed then. So the idea that they had to like double and triple down on that definitely feels redundant, definitely feels excessive, because that was an idea that was always omnipresent kind of throughout this age and era of social media, that they would come in, someone not the people running the company would come in and have access to your data, to your information, to all that stuff. So the need to keep hitting that again in this volume, you could have lost it, and you wouldn't have lost anything from
This could have been
the
another
story.
4-issue series easily if you just cut a lot of the fluff and
Yeah.
redundancy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, 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 yeah.
I,
And
like
if you're,
I,
yeah, you're right.
the
I
curious thing to
had
me is why it was longer than the first series when it had less to say.
well, well, I
I'm
thought
not
that was
sure
the
they. I'm not sure they
yeah.
thought it had less to say, but
Yes, yeah, I'm sure it was that they were given 6 issues, and this is how they thought. This is what they thought their story would go. If it's going to be 6, I think I would have rather have seen. What would I wanted more of? Because I do think you're right. You probably could have pared it down to 4 and matched volume 1. But if it stays at 6, I think I wanted. I think you need more time. There are more things they could have done with our 2 leads, with Nate and Ed. Maybe showing them how they work together still, how how they're what this ruse they're doing of maybe give a little more context to what Nate's doing with his public facing persona of him lying to the public, saying that he was responsible for all these things, the events that happened in volume 1. And maybe less of some of the, I don't want to say less of the tower plot, because you maybe less time with all of them, because none of
I
them
mean,
really matter. The specifics of them don't really matter. They just need to be an entity. They just need
right.
to be. They just need to be the antagonist. So maybe we don't need as much time with them.
When you meet Grace, she's the stand-in for everyone in that organization. Like, you don't need more
Yeah,
than that.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Like, she can just be talking to people, and you just assume like these are a bunch of people who are pretty similar to her.
Yeah, you know
Like
what?
what I was saying, what Aaron Sorkin would call the pajama people. The people who like sit in their pajamas, hack into things, like make a mess, and don't live with the consequences because they don't
Now
live in the
that
real
you
world.
say that, the fact that their group is introduced to the audience with 4 specific characters who are all given names and given quasi arcs and backstories, you're right. I think we don't need that. They could just been faces, the people she's talking to, and then when the assassination attempt happens, it's just, oh, that was the one guy there. When
Right.
when later at the end, when they meet up with the kid, the teenager, you just know, oh, that was one of the guys. You just remember that's just one of the kids.
Right. It doesn't
Who's
matter
part
what
of
their
this group.
names are. I don't need to know.
Yeah, 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 exactly,
like,
exactly.
you know,
But you drop
anything
their
else about
face in
them.
a couple times along with a dozen other faces, and you just know that's someone from the group. But the fact that they focused on these 4 made it seem like they were the 4, when, as they say, it's hundreds or thousands of people across the country, across the world.
Right.
So
Now,
you only need to focus on one
I will say,
for the story to work.
if they were thinking we got a 6 issue extension with the possibility of another 6 after that, then I understand laying all this pipe and saying we don't know what we're going to use if this goes issues 11 to 15 or whatever. But for being the 6 issue series it was, I doubt they needed most of this.
This is one thing, maybe now that we've read it now, and I would have loved to have asked Marcus Toe about if this volume specifically was ordered at 6. I get the feeling that it was. I don't get the feeling that they were looking to make this ongoing. I just the way there's something, I get a vibe about it that it was like they were ordered 6 issues, and so they're going to tell a story with 6 issues, because it ends. Not saying they, because at no point did I feel like the story took a hard turn towards an end, kind of like we felt with Joyride. Something that you and I talked about at the end of the end of volume 3 there was that it seemed very clear that the last two issues of Joyride, issues 11 and 12, were like an entire story arc crammed in at the end, because they had to get to the end they wanted to get to. I never felt that here. I never felt like they were telling a story and then took a hard left turn towards the end. So I feel like they were given 6 issues, and this is what they ended up telling.
I agree that they it did not feel like they pivoted to an ending quickly, but I do think they were leaving some breadcrumbs for themselves in case they ever came back for volume 3 or another.
Oh,
6 issues
okay.
So I assume there's a very specific reason our boys fled to Egypt at the end, because it was like, we'll dump them off in Egypt.
They never and they never got to the bottom specifically of the tower. So that because we had so I
Right.
guess there are some threads. Okay, so if you're saying they were maybe potentially setting up for a volume three, that
And
okay,
then if
that I
they
could
end
buy a
up,
little better.
and if they ended up flipping one of Grace's hackers to their side,
The
they
kid,
would look
yeah,
like geniuses for
yeah.
having given them all character arcs in the previous series. So it's
Mhm.
just one of those things that, because I know this is definitively the end of it, as much as we can ever know in comics,
Yeah.
that it's just like, yeah, this stuff's not working. Like I was just reading, what I'm calling issue 5, like issues 5 and 6, and
Yeah.
I was just like, I can see how much there's left. Why am I getting all of this exposition now? Halfway through the series, there is more behind me than in front of me, and we're still rolling out new characters,
Yeah.
explaining
Yeah.
things in a
I,
ham-handed way.
I think now that I've had a few minutes to sit on it, the Nate's public confession, I guess, of it, hey, I'm a spy, I'm a double agent, all just set up. I've been trying to work from the inside. Yes, we signed away your life to the CIA, but things took a turn. I've been working with Ed. I wish now that had come earlier, like in issue 2, and then the majority of the series was the two of them on the run together, having to work together again, because so much of the first arc was you start with them together and they immediately split. And it seems like they're working at cross purposes, but then they secretly work together. I think I would have liked to have seen them on the run together and have that been the majority of the run. Of now Ed's cover is blown, everyone knows he's alive. Nate's cover is blown, everyone knows he lied and has been leading on the government, and now these two have to work together in secret to stop the new Save Yourself, which is Sea Queen, which is Grace's character. I think that would have been, I think that would have had the potential to have less of those big exposition dumps at the end or towards the end of the series. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? Like,
yeah. I mean,
if we you
even
front
the
load that,
exposition, I kind of put this on the editor because I was like reading some pages, and like, by the way, so I talked about how the general arc of the story. I also think Marcus Toe's art was next level on this
it's
volume.
beautiful.
Like, well, like some, like I love like the cleanness of a 9-panel grid on a page. Like I just love it. And when he gives you like, 4x3, 4x4, 5x5, across like a splash page, like I just love that like quick beat storytelling. And frankly, that type of paneling makes it nearly impossible to get bogged down with exposition because there's not enough space to dump a bunch of words there.
You're already
Now,
moving.
he does one of the things that I hear from other readers is one of the most confusing things in comics, which is when it has, I can't remember if it was Nate or Ed's head in the center of the page, and then like this
Oh yeah,
rainbow
yeah.
of art over the top of it. Now, I don't think it's particularly confusing, but it is one of those where you sit there and look at it for a good 5-10 seconds before you start like reading it because you're like, let me see where all the panels are, all the words are, make sure which panel goes with which, or which box goes with which panel, and yada yada.
You know what? As you were saying that, I was just scrolling through. I was actually looking for that page. I found another one, a double splash page. It's where Grace is in the top left corner, and
Yes.
Ed's in the bottom right, and all the panels are tilted.
Yeah.
And but there's 12 panels. Three rows of four, and they're I guess they're typing back and forth because that's the text we're getting from Darren Bennett. But I can see if you're someone who hasn't read a lot of comics, you're going to look at that and be like, okay, I guess I know where I start, but then do I go down and then across, or do I
I
go
can't
across
tell you
and then?
how many
Yeah,
times people have sent me like pictures of like,
yeah, yeah.
and it happens a lot in superhero books.
It
It's a big
it
thing, like
does.
right
It
before,
does.
right after the title page.
Well, because it looks cool. it looks cool, but there is a sense of, I mean, for me, it's just of a history of reading this stuff, and you just get a sense. I can look at a page and be like, okay, oh, this is going clockwise for a reason. You know,
Well,
like
right.
I'm going to start at the top and go to the
It's
right, and I'm going
it's
to end on
usually
the left
intuitive,
page. Yeah, yeah.
and I
Well,
think
but it's
people
intuitive
who
to someone who's read a lot of comics. Sometimes it very much isn't. Even to someone who has read a lot of comics, I got to sit and look at it, and then I'll figure it out. But I can understand someone start reading and being like, "Oh, wait a minute, I read these panels out of order."
right, but that's not the worst case scenario. Like, I think if you're going to make a page like this, you don't put like a huge spoiler type thing on it that someone might accidentally read out of order, which isn't what's happening.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, worst case scenario, you just have to go read it again in a different order, or you assemble it. It's a very active, participatory medium,
Yeah.
which is what we love about it. And I think a page like that, that's both beautiful and challenging. Now, if a whole book were written like that, it would just be obnoxious.
It can be. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
one page, you're pretty familiar with the artists and the storytelling.
Yeah.
I think you can hang with it, and yeah,
Well,
I think it was
especially
used to great effect here.
well, that's what I was going to say. Exactly that. When it's done for a storytelling reason. In that page there, it's two people working at cross purposes, and in each one of those panels is a different scene from somewhere else around the world. So as they're typing back and forth, kind of throwing barbs and insults back at each other, you're seeing what's happening all around, all these one panel shots of all these places around the world. To get a sense of the scale of what you're doing there. And I think the idea that it's off kilter, the fact that it's slanted there, it's meant to put the reader on edge, because that scene is a moment when Grace activates all the hackers around the world, and like hundreds or thousands of domestic terror attacks take place around the world. So it's a very violent, a very unsettling moment that happens right there. So yeah, you're right. It's used to good effect. It's not done just for show. They're trying to get something across in the storytelling. So when they deploy that, it's meant to be deliberate. It's thought out. They're trying to say something about the story there, and not just be like, hey, look at this cool thing that I drew. If that's the reason that someone does it in a book, then it's not worth it. If it's just to look cool, then you failed as a storyteller, in my mind.
Yeah, well, and I'm not bashing these people because I reference it a lot, but that is often the type of like gimmick you see from like a lot of Kickstarted books. And like there are great Kickstarted books, but there are a lot of people who are like flashy artists or storytellers who think, I don't need an editor, I can do this all myself.
Yeah.
And they're like, people love these type of pages and they don't understand why the impact doesn't land.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's not to get down this rabbit trail, but to me, it's like the way that Zack Snyder uses slow motion.
It's exactly what I was going to say. It's exactly
Really?
Yeah.
I was like, it's like if
the idea,
everything's epic, nothing's epic.
It's the point of this is to show you how cool I think this looks. It has nothing to do with the story, nothing to do with character or plot, and a lot of those Kickstarter type books from kind of indie creators who, they're trying to hustle, they're trying to put the work out there, and I respect them for that. But if the goal is just to say, look how good I am, look how cool I can draw, like if that's your goal, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily make a story. If you're just putting this cool action shot that's in slow motion because you got to show everything because you want everyone to see what's going on, if you're just doing it so they can see whatever's written on a bullet casing as it flies out of the chamber,
right?
Like if that's the only reason you're doing it, then like what's the point? You haven't added anything to the story. It's all flash. It's no substance.
Yeah. Which, this is not the Zack Snyder hating club. There's like even a shot in the new Superman trailer that irritates me. Which
is it
like,
him saving the girl?
No,
or
no.
The two? Oh, yeah.
The saving the girl, I loved because I was like, oh, this might be a real Superman movie. Yeah. But when
that's in slow mo too. Yeah,
right. But that one, I get the slow mo, right? But because that's how the panel would look in a comic. So I'm like, I get it. Like him punching the tooth coming out in slow motion and hitting the lens of the camera and bouncing off.
Yeah.
It feels like an unnecessary fourth wall break while also being unnecessary slow motion. But I think it was like, look how cool our attention to detail is. Look how gritty this is while still being bright and colorful. And I'm just like, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why you would make
That
that
one
choice
also
other than you
that
think it's cool.
well, that one also I think is for 3D because the movie is in
That
3D.
makes it that much worse.
Well,
But
yeah, I agree. Yeah, but I'm anti 3D and in general. I think it's a gimmick and I think it's stupid. Again, it doesn't add anything in my mind to the experience.
so you're not a big fan of
Nothing.
the lenticular variants,
No. So no.
except
So
the
here's the
button.
thing, though. Here's the thing, though. I'm fine with that because that's just one image. You're not telling a story with that. You're not getting anything out of a story. There's no storyteller reason to make something in 3D other than it looks cool. You know, like when you watch the first Avatar or whatnot, and you saw it in 3D, it's like, okay, so you can see what the hell, Pandora.
Yeah,
Did I get that right?
you're inside the tree that they're reproducing.
Yeah, like
in. I'm
you
like,
can see it's
I
in
don't.
3D.
I'd
It's
actually
like,
prefer not to be.
it's
I
like
would like a little more distance.
I, I understand how film works. I understand that I'm watching something on a screen and like I have depth perception. So I don't need like nothing is added to me. Nothing's added to the experience because like I want to be told a story. If you just want, but again, if your goal is to just show something cool, then that's fine. Then stop pretending like you're trying to tell a story.
Right. And to be clear, all of this we're saying is in contrast with Marcus Toe,
Yes,
who
yeah,
delivers
yeah.
these things perfectly.
Yeah.
We're just saying,
yeah,
like, in
when
any
it's done
lesser,
poorly, when it's done poorly,
any lesser
when it's
book or
done poorly.
medium, you
Yeah.
know, these are real irritants and
Yeah, yeah.
like substantial problems. But yeah, I am just thrilled with the way the art turned out in this one. The overall direction of the story was interesting. The storytelling was bad. The characters were bad. The dialogue was bad. They were like,
It's clunky. It's very clunky.
yeah, it's clunky. And then there were some like cheesy action line movies or action movie lines that were, given to characters. And I was like, this feels like just a different genre than the first volume. Because it felt a little more like espionage thriller, like high level conspiracy.
It is. It's a different genre of book. It really is. I think that's very fair. Whether that was, I assume that was intentional. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. So I guess that probably adds to maybe why it feels a little different. Like they've made a different choice.
Yeah, or perhaps the creators' views have really shifted, and they said, "Oh my gosh, that first book we may have come off really naive. Now we've really got to prove that we understand the complexity of that world."
That could be, and then they got a little too lost in the sauce, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I
can see
think because it's all talented writers whose work I admire in every other project I've read.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is
could
like
be,
the one-off, and like I do this with, but I'm like, because I'm glad you had this too, because like even writers that I love, I will like pick up a book every once in a while and just be like, man, I feel like they just totally missed on that one.
Yeah.
And usually I assume I'm the problem. When I'm like, well, this person does fantastic work. They've written infinitely more comics than I will ever write. So like they know what they're doing. I don't. I guess I like it just didn't connect with me. And I try to make my criticisms that way rather than this is bad.
Yeah, oh yeah. There are very few things I think are outright bad. I've read plenty of them, but I think this could also be a case of, specifically in terms of writing. I mean, Lansing and Kelly are super early in their career still as writers. This is Hacktivist as
Well,
a
and were they
project.
multitasking at this point? Were they doing Big Two work while doing this?
No, they were not at this point. At this
Okay.
point, no. They maybe they were doing some licensed stuff, or they probably just started Joyride. Like they were. This is the very beginning of their career, so like they don't have the reps under them. And there are plenty of writers you go back and or even accomplished writers from outside of comics who come in and their early issues. You can tell if you've read a lot of comics, you can tell that they're still getting their sea legs under them. And again, that's not me saying I can do any better, but when you've read later works of
Yeah, when you
theirs
see them arrive in their final
and
form,
you see,
yeah,
oh yeah, they have figured something out that I guess every good comic writer does figure out in terms of how to deliver, how to write and stage and frame certain scenes and how to get through an exposition dump, because sometimes you have to have an exposition dump, you know. So how do you get around that? How do you do that in a way that feels that doesn't feel like you're just unloading a bunch of information on the audience? And so it could be a case of, yeah, they just didn't quite have the reps built up yet. And if they were to take this exact same subject matter with all the exact same plot points and beats and character moments, that they would probably do it a lot differently and probably a lot better now, just because they're more experienced. So I'm not saying that as an excuse to give them a pass or anything, but it very well could be a reason. Because yeah, you see writer. I mean, if you're not getting better at this, you're not going to stay in the industry. And the fact that Lansing and Kelly have now gone on to be reliable names for both DC and Marvel, that they are people that are sought after, who they want these guys telling their stories and working in their worlds. The fact that they were given Star Trek to take on and write stories in that canon, they have the talent, they have the ability. So yeah, maybe this is just still a little too green. You know, we're still cooking a little here. We're still baking in the oven, haven't quite come out to a finished product yet, or not close enough to a finished product yet. So I think there's some moments in that you can see where maybe it's overwritten with some of the dialogue, some of the choices they make in terms of how they deliver the story. It's just, you know, not quite as smooth yet.
yeah, yeah, and it's, you know, like, I'm glad I read this. Like, it would, like, the completionist in me would be insane if I had read this before and I said, like, yeah, I really like volume one. Let's just talk about that and pretend the second one didn't happen. That would eat at me. Like, I would die if I,
Yeah.
just, it's like holding in a sneeze. I just can't do it.
You
So
want to get to, because you want to see what kind of journey that the creators have decided to go on. What story do they want to tell? What do they find important about these two individuals who are, you know, for our purposes, in as we're going to be discussing these books, you know, these very stereotypical boy genius tech billionaire, right?
right.
You know, so how were they viewed in 2014 when this book starts versus, and also I think how they see themselves. You know, there's not a ton of self-reflection. There's a little bit of self-reflection in this book about the kind of the awesome power that they help wrought. But not like a ton. They're still seen, I think, as we said at the beginning, they're still meant to be seen as righteous. Even though they didn't make all the right choices,
Right.
they still screwed up. Their intentions are not to be questioned.
Right. Except by other characters who are doing it
Well,
constantly.
I'm saying the reader.
Shooting at
the
them.
reader.
But right.
Yeah, I'm saying the reader.
Yeah,
When we read
trust them.
this, yeah, we're meant to trust that their intentions are pure, whether or not their actions or decisions are great. We are not supposed to question them. They are in that way impeachable, which is not something you would do now if you're writing about this type of character. And that's something that we're definitely going to see as we move through the rest of the books that we've picked here. That erosion of trust, not just in the technology, but in the people who make the technology, people responsible for it. Those things obviously go hand in hand, but here we're still on the side of the geniuses are still good.
Right. We're
You
still
know,
on the side of, if you find the right people in this,
Yeah.
then we could trust them.
And
Then the technology would work. And it's like,
if they were
as
left
long
to
as
do their own
anybody
thing,
can
yeah,
do whatever they want with a computer,
yes, yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's just not going to work. So there is still, despite how murky this gets, it's still naive.
Yeah,
which is amazing.
I think the message or the kind of the underlying thing is that if these two guys would have been left to their own devices to run their app, if these guys were left alone to run your life, everything would have been okay. None of this would have happened. It's
Right.
only when there was outside interference
As
that
long as
drove the
they could
wedge.
just these two like 30
Yes,
something year old white guys,
yes.
as long
If
as
we,
they could choose every government in the world and every regime and
yeah,
change them at their will,
yes, yeah,
because they would never misuse it.
yeah.
And
They
it's just like,
exactly,
my
exactly.
gosh, do you hear yourselves?
They would never coordinate these simultaneous domestic terror acts around the world. They would never weaponize this. So yeah, the idea that the outside interference is what caused the problem here because these two guys are good and we're supposed to trust them. You're right. There's still this level of, at least the way that we would look at it now, that level of I guess it is naiveness, naivety, and I was going to say ignorance. That's a little too harsh, but that was the world we lived in then. That was still the thought that these guys are so smart. They have all the answers, that we can trust them
Right.
almost blindly without any kind of oversight or regulation, because that's when someone else comes in who's not as smart as they are. That's when things get messed up. That's what gums up the system, and that's what corrupts and ruins this thing that is perfect, for lack of a better word, which is obviously a fallacy because it was never perfect. Those
Right.
guys don't have all the answers, but we deluded ourselves for a while thinking that was the case, and this book still lives in that bubble.
But the interesting thing here is that our guys are always on the defensive with the US government. And I would have loved it if someone was making the case, well, look, we did this because whether you realize it or not, eventually you would be doing this. And we thought it was better in the hands of the public than the CIA having the power to wipe out, to start an uprising in a North African country and replace the regime. The U.S. government's actually done that,
Yes.
and they would be that much more dangerous with the internet. So we're doing this. We're privatizing. Well, what's the Tony Stark line?
I was
successfully privatized world security.
That is phase 1 and 2 of the MCU. It's where Tony Stark starts and where Captain America starts, and how they eventually cross into a civil war. This idea of Tony Stark is the guy who is saying, I'm outside of government. Yeah, I've privatized world peace, to become the guy to be like, you know what, we need some oversight. Have him flip, and you have Captain America, the ultimate soldier, the guy who just wants to serve his country, who believes in it so much that he's willing to commit federal crimes to lie in his enlistment form to get there just to fight. For him to be the guy that says, you know what, we can't trust the government. To have those guys flip and be like, our hands are the best, we're the ones in charge. That sort of flipping of perspectives through experience, it would have been an interesting kind of overlay onto here. Maybe at that point would have felt a little too on the nose here, because we would have been 2014, 2015. That's post Avengers. We've probably already had Winter Soldier.
And
I don't think
Ultron.
we've had, and maybe we're building towards Ultron here. So we wouldn't have quite have had Civil War in terms of MCU Civil War. Although at this point we may not have had. Oh no, we would have had the first Civil War. Yeah, of course we would have had the first Civil War. We might not have had the second Civil War yet. Civil War 2, I think, was like 2016. Might have been 2015, somewhere in there. But that idea is interesting to me. And I think if they had grafted that onto our characters and said, if they had spent more time on that and had these two guys be fugitives together trying to dismantle the thing that, take down the
and
monster that
punching
they
back
released.
instead of just taking
Yeah.
body blow after body blow.
Yeah. Well, and if the volume had started with them revealing themselves and going on the run, then they could have spent 4 issues of them being on the offensive. The fact that they were still apart, and the fact that Nate was still presenting this public facing lie, meant they could only be reactive, because they couldn't tell the people, the new save yourself, that's Grace's from the tower, as he tells them, like, you guys are acting on a lie, because you think what happens is I sold out my friend and got him killed. Well, not only is he not dead, but we were working together on it, and we're still working together now. But they can't say that before, because they have to allow all these events to happen. to like force our two guys in a position where they have to act versus, yeah, if they had just started that earlier and the book could have been about them trying to take down the monster that they unleashed, this thing that's gotten out of their hands that they thought they could control, but now they can't, and having to deal with those repercussions. I think that would have been maybe a little more engaging kind of story frame for this volume.
Yeah. So ultimately, glad we read it, enjoyed it, but I'm ready to move on. From Hacktivist.
There is the sense too that we talked about this idea of you get to the end and you're like, God, you still don't see the bigger picture about technology and quote unquote tech geniuses. You're still deifying these characters. Even after everything that happens in this book, there is still a sense, like we said, that these guys are the good guys, and they get the hero shot at the end. They're on the motorcycles driving to Cairo. Like, they look cool.
They look cool. That like they didn't get
the rousing victory, but yeah,
the money corrupts and yada yada.
Yeah.
They did see, I think they projected the future of QAnon, in kind of interesting
a little
way.
bit. Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
they name check Anonymous in here. So
I know. Yeah.
That was in the air.
They've got a non out there and they just needed the Q part. And I'm trying to remember now because this is what trauma does to the memory, but QAnon was a major factor in the 2016 election or the 2020. I thought the identity of QAnon was ousted during the 2020 cycle, and so it kind of took
think
some
it was
of the.
It was in the air. Did it affect 20? It was definitely in the air between those two generals. I'm with you. I can't remember if it had that profound of effect on the 2016 general.
I've looked it up. It does not. It originated in 2017.
Oh wow, so that's way later. Wow,
right.
Time is all kinds of compressed. Okay, that's way later than I would have thought it was.
Yeah, but it was like it was letting people live in an alternate reality for the whole first Trump administration.
Yeah.
Because it was just so relentless, and like media had, like 2016 was the fracturing of like information in media.
So it grew out of a result of that fracture, not a cause of that fracture. Okay, all right.
And I think it was like someone.
Now that you said that, it is coming back to me now.
But I think it was like someone who was like opportunistic and bored. Like,
probably, yeah.
I actually don't think the QAnon person behind it is like a true believer in any of the stuff. It's just like, I'm just gonna throw crazy stuff out here, and I'll get a big following. I don't know what's
It's a troll gone. It's a troll gone wild. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was.
But you are right though. That is what's depicted here in a way. This idea of latching on to a view of the world and then weaponizing that across other like-minded people who feel disaffected in some way, whether that's a legitimate, whether I don't know. That's a harsh thing to say, I guess. But you know what I'm saying, right? The people that feel like they've been slighted by society in some way, who are looking for something to grasp onto that feels real to them, and weaponizing that against them, but in a way that it seems to be for them,
right?
And giving them an outlet giving them a venue to vent their frustration and anger, and in this case, giving them the literal tools with those whatever those tower laptops. It was a hardware thing that was being disseminated. Giving those people a place and the actual weapons to go out and do what they think they deserve to do. Right.
Right. Well, I mean, but also, yeah, you see like the wild overreaches and, fictionalized, like, I just swiped 8 people's credit cards at this red light, and I've already scrubbed them, and you've got 48 hours or whatever to do whatever you want. And then like our hero is in a room where he's like, look, I know you probably all turned off your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth when you got here, but don't worry, I was able to take all the data off your phone anyway. I'm like, is this really our hero saying this? So anyway, wild stuff. But that's That's what happens when you start speculating about near future technology. So anyway, thank you all for listening to Hacktivist Volume 2 and for reading along. We will be back next week with a mini introduction to set up the following series, which I am blanking on at the moment, but it will be in the episode description and in our feed next week. Follow us all the places, Blue Sky, Instagram, wherever, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Peace.